been a trial statistician involved in a trials unit at the MRC for nearly 45 years, and she said that there were still lots of things at the conference that were making her think, which I think is fantastic. Jill Geit, I'm sure some of you working in obstetrics and gynecology will know Jill. She's the consumer editor of the Cochrane Pregnancy and Childbirth Group. And she said that a couple of the sessions at the conference were critical to the work she's doing on a particular trial, and there are things to take away and help us to move forward. So we were delighted at the conference, some of the things at the conference were having such a direct impact. Adrian Mander, who's a hub director in Cambridge, he couldn't believe it that he went to an adaptive design session. I think he was chairing it, and there were more than 200 people there. I don't think he ever thought he'd see the day when there were that many people attending an adaptive design session. Justine Rees is an operational director within the trials unit at Imperial in London, and she'd actually said that she found it was a great opportunity to hear talks by the challenges faced by her statistical colleagues and other statisticians. And there were several interesting take-home messages. And finally, Mark Pittman, at the time the Hub network was established, Mark was the MRC program manager for the Hub network. And he was there, obviously seeing how we were getting on. He's no longer the program manager, that's David Crosby now, but Mark had said it was great to see so many young investigators covering a broad range of topics. So one of the reasons that it was such a success is in no small part down to the local organising committee, who were people, with the exception of Emma Tomlinson, are all actually in the Ireland hub, in the HRB TMNRN. So we're really grateful to Mike Clark for chairing that local organising committee, but he was helped by Gillian Shorter, Lisa Maguire and Rosemary Morrison. So I just formally wanted to thank them here. I did thank them at the meeting, but I'm totally indebted to them for organising the conference. Thank you. So I wanted to say a little bit about how we're organised in the network. If you look at the central box, we've always had an executive committee, and that's always consisted of the hub directors, the network coordinator, who's Emma Tomlinson, and the programme manager from MRC head office, who's now David Crosby. So you can see along the bottom there are currently 5 hubs. There's the hub in Bristol, directed by Jane Blaisley, the one in Cambridge, Adrian Mander, the one at the MRC Trials Unit, which is directed by Max Palmer, and the one at the Clinical Trial Support Unit in Oxford, directed by Richard Peter and Rory Collins, and my own hub in the Northwest. But we've really come a long way since 2009, and we're really focusing now on the working groups within our network, and they're the real engine of the network driving the work forward, and I'll say a little bit more about them in a minute. But when we got our extension grant recently, in 2013, we decided that we felt we'd done quite a good job in the UK, but that we needed to try to improve our reach internationally. So you can see at the top of that slide, we have recently set up an international advisory group with Isabel Boutron and Joel Alexander from outside of the UK. We had our first international advisory group meeting before the summer, and we hope to really try to push forward those links as we go through our next few years. So when people were looking at the hubs and the people in the hubs initially, I think a lot of people thought, oh, that's a lot of statisticians all in one place. But I wanted to show you that actually the hub network is more than just statistical methodology. We'd actually undertaken a priority setting exercise, and again that involved your colleague, my colleague Mike Clark. We involved CTU directors in the UK network to try to find out from them what did they think were the most important trials methodological research priorities. And what you can see, I'm just focusing on the top 3 of this slide, that clearly there was consensus that the things that were eating away at most CTU directors and trialists were trying to find better methods to boost recruitment, thinking of methods to choose appropriate outcomes to measure, and looking at methods to minimize attrition. So although those areas do have impact on statistical analysis of trials, they are actually trial conduct and trial recruitment issues. So So when we decided we would set up working groups within the network, you can see that we were very clear in that we were not just focusing on statistical aspects of design and analysis, but also around methods for improving recruitment, choosing outcomes, and improving trial conduct. I think the working groups of our network is an area where hopefully people within your hub within your network, could seek, to collaborate with us. The working groups are not just people from within the network, but there are also external members as well. Those working groups do run projects as a working group, and they quite often undertake surveys of various stakeholders so that the work that they do is well informed by evidence. The working groups do give advice, sometimes to trial funders and sometimes to trialists, and they are responsible for engaging with the stakeholders that you saw on the previous organogram, consisting of stakeholders such as the CQ network, the MHRA, trial funders, Cochrane collaboration, etc. So we do rely heavily on the working groups to deliver the strategy for the network. Each group does have two co-leads. In addition, we've also invested heavily in our new investigators. So we've developed a cohort of network-funded PhD students listed on the slide here. And we're really hoping next year to have a PhD student meeting, which we would hope would be open to any PhD student who's working in trials methodology research. So I have communicated this with Declan, and hopefully if there are students in your network who would be interested in such a meeting, we can bring them together at some point in 2016. We realised that we'd spent quite a lot of time in our first 5 years focusing on statistical methods, recruitment methods, trial conduct methods, really working on things that matter to methodologists. And we hadn't particularly been talking that much to actually clinical trialists, to the healthcare practitioners who actually run and deliver the trials. And when we had a look, we realised that actually there wasn't a huge amount of activity in terms of clinical capacity building, specifically for clinical trials. So a lot of the fellowship schemes that are around are not necessarily geared towards clinical trials. I think one of the most important things that we have done, as well as funding clinical PhDs in the area of trials methodology, we've actually run twice now workshops entitled How to be a Good Chief Investigator. So these workshops are targeted at clinical trialists who've just received their first trial grant. And they've been very well received, consisting largely of a series of plenary talks by experienced clinical trialists and a CTU director, together with small group work to find out what are the problems that they're currently facing and to share best practice with other chief investigators. And we hope to continue running those sorts of workshops into the future. So as I said, we've been in existence since 2009 as a network, and it's now that we're really beginning to see the fruits of our labour. And we decided, rather than expect each group to try to deliver impact on their particular area or their particular project, we're going to try to boost that impact by packaging things up. And the list of things on the left-hand side of this slide is really what we're calling, consists of our guidance pack 1. Various things that we've been doing for a number of years now that we think are ready to really achieve some impact. I'm going to talk about a few of them. Self-selected, because they're the ones that I know the most about, so I apologise to my network colleagues for things that I'm not going into in so much detail. But I'll also say a little bit about the Guidance Pack 2 on the right-hand side of the slide, about what's coming new in 2016. So those of you that were at your own launch meeting earlier in the year in Dublin, if you were there, you will have heard me speak about the COMET initiative. This was really one of the very first network-funded projects. It was actually started with a £50,000 grant, and it involved 3 of the hubs, ourselves, Bristol, and the All Ireland hub that Mike Clark leads. And to date, what we've been able to do is to develop an international network of people who are interested in the development of core outcome sets. So this is a standardized set of outcome measures that we would expect trialists working in a particular clinical condition to measure and report. And with that £50,000, we've managed to leverage further funding such that we can keep the searchable COMET database up to date through regular systematic reviews. So this slide here shows you that over the course of the last 33 years, the number of core outcome sets that are being published each year is steadily going up. And again, it's highly relevant to your network because several of these core outcome sets that are either published or are ongoing are being led by people in your network, and certainly Declan Devane is involved with the COMET initiative to a large degree, so I'm grateful to Declan for his input. You can see here that the COMET initiative now is having more of a global reach over the last couple of years than it did. So until a couple of years ago, the vast majority of visitors to the website were from the UK, but since 2014, you can see now that the UK visitors, 49%, we are now in the minority just, but we continue to try to develop our international activity. Now, I thought I'd show this just because I'm always interested in why people go to the COMET website, and although that arrow is actually pointing at something that says I am a person with a condition and it's marked 0, actually that's not the case anymore. That should be a 1. So what I'm showing here, we ran a 4-week pop-up survey. When people searched the COMET database, before they got the results of their search back, they were asked to give us a reason as to why they were searching that day. And what we found was that about 50% of the people who were searching actually just closed down the box immediately. They didn't have to give an answer, they could just close it down, and apparently that's about as you would expect for a pop-up survey. But the rest of the 50% split across the particular reasons that we've given here. And you can see the highest ranking reason was that people were actually developing a core outcome set. But pleasingly, there were also a large number, 33, who were actually planning a clinical trial. So exactly the sort of people that we thought would be interested in the database, both the core outcome set developers themselves to make sure nobody else is already doing what they want to do, but also the users of core outcome sets, the people planning the clinical trials themselves. Now, COMET's had quite a lot of investment from the MRC and the European Union, and we've managed to have quite a lot of impact in various places. But an equally important area of activity and outcome measurement is that around resource use measurement. And again, a network-funded project was the DIRM project. The DIRM is the Database of Instruments for Resource Use Measurement. And this is essentially, again, a searchable database where you can find all sorts of different resource use measurement instruments that people have developed over time and run in a particular clinical trial. And so it may be that if you look here that particularly you're interested in the one that I know most about in neurology, looking at in a trial of anti-epileptic drugs, how has the data on resource use been collected? And you can actually click into that and obtain a copy of that questionnaire. So we think this is a really useful resource. And both the COMET database and the DIRM database are both referenced in the NIHR guidance to applicants, as indeed I think they are also in the HRB guidance. So again, we're very grateful to those of you that have been connecting with the HRB on our behalf. That's great. A more recent success has been around our work on sharing individual participant data. So again, a network-funded project that involves a few of the hubs. And there's been a lot of activity over the last few years amongst pharmaceutical industry sharing of data. And they've been coming together and setting up systems for being able to access their data through a kind of third-party external review panel. But we've been slower, I think, in the public sector to actually develop our approach to sharing individual participant data. So there was a project led by Captain Tudor Smith here in Liverpool that consisted of several components being brought together. So there was a CTU survey of practice, a literature review, and a review of data sharing policy documents. And they were brought together to draft guidance that was then discussed and amended by an expert panel. That finalised guidance, or near finalised guidance, was then shown and for comment and consultation amongst the CTU network in the UK, from which the final guidance was then developed. That final guidance is publicly available, and it's actually been endorsed by the MRC, Cancer Research UK, the Wellcome Trust, and the CTU network. This is now publicly available. It's actually published in BMC Medicine, and importantly, the CTU network has established a data sharing task and finish group. And you can see from the slide that the remit of that group is to actually facilitate the implementation of this good practice guidance. So we will hope over the course of next year to hear feedback from that group in terms of how they've been getting on with actually implementing that good practice guidance. So in the new guidance pack 2 for 2016, I'm just highlighting 3 of the sets of guidance that will come through there. The first is around interventions in surgical trials. So Jane Blaseby group in Bristol, together with the Cambridge Hub, led that work, and they've essentially written an issues to consider paper during the course of trial design for a surgical trial. And then, excuse me, also led by the Bristol Hub, work on maximising the impact of qualitative research into feasibility studies for clinical trials, be that around best methods for recruitment or looking at the outcomes to be measured in clinical trials. But it's trying to make the best use of qualitative methodology alongside the more quantitative methodology of RCTs. And of course, I couldn't deliver this webinar without plugging the SWOT repository. So this is led by Mike Clark. Studies within a trial, studies within a review. So it's clear that we as trials methodologists believe in randomization and are convincing our clinical colleagues that the best way to evaluate healthcare interventions is, if possible, through a randomized trial. But as methodologists, we've been very slow to use that same methodology for looking at how we do things in trials. So the studies within a trial approach is to nest methodological studies within trials so that we can try to optimize, improve the way we actually do trials. So there's a very nice repository, if I can just move, publicly accessible. You can go into that and find protocols for running nested methodological studies. You can follow a protocol in your own trial and pool the results together with people looking at the same study across different trials. A suite of projects that we've brought together really under the heading of Trial Steering Committee project. There's 3 studies, in fact 4 studies now, that have got something to do with trial steering committees, and they're almost all at the finishing stages and writing for publication. So in 2016 we're really hoping that we can organise a workshop funded by the network that can disseminate the findings from these different projects. So one is around trial steering committees and indeed data monitoring committees for studies looking at the evaluation of diagnostic tests, which are rather different from your classical randomized trial. There's also a project on developing, updating and redeveloping guidance in terms of reference for trial steering committees for trials generally. And there's been an interesting ethnographic study of group decision making amongst trial steering committees and trial management groups. So looking at how those committees contribute to trial conduct. And more recently, it's just been established that a database of statistical expertise, so clinical trials units and clinical trials unit statisticians can register their interest and availability for sitting on clinical trial oversight committees. Those of you that are chief investigators or are working in trials units will know how difficult it is to find experienced trial statisticians for either a trial steering committee or a data monitoring committee, because everybody is very busy and finding people who've got the right experience is really quite difficult, but we're hoping this database will help with that. So that's one to look out for. We realise that as well as funding individual projects, that there might be more that could be gained from making a more substantial investment in what we were calling at the time big ideas. So in 2013, we as the Hub directors kind of went away and we brainstormed ourselves and within our own Hub colleagues and came back to a meeting whereby we put forward what we thought were big ideas. There is a real need to look at best use of adaptive designs, and it was clear from the NIHR that they would like to see more adaptive designs where appropriate coming forward. And the people in the adaptive design working group identified that one of the blocks in that is the lack of awareness amongst clinical trials unit statisticians of the current thinking and the current methods for adaptive designs. Much of the expertise in adaptive designs is actually in the pharmaceutical industry rather than the public sector. So the network decided to fund an outreach officer who started in post earlier this year and is engaging with CTUs, going on visits and trying to work out what those CTUs might need to develop their own adaptive design capacity. We also, recognising that methods to boost recruitment was the #1 priority for trials methodology research identified by the UK CTU directors, people who'd already done work around recruitment research were all telling us that it's extremely difficult to search the literature to find information on recruitment research, and that systematic reviews can take an awfully long time to design the search strategy and review 40,000 papers just to find 5 that were relevant. So we decided this was a good way of capitalising on the added value of the network, where there are lots of people interested in recruitment and could hopefully all chip in. We had a post funded that undertook the search and set up the database, and now we're getting a number of people. We've reviewed the abstract and we've now got people reviewing the full papers. So this is a again, it's publicly available, searchable database of recruitment research. The papers will be classified in different ways. This slide, I should have said, this is, again, it is one of the reasons why recruitment is the top priority for studies funded by the MRC or the HTA in the UK. In terms of the bottom line, which is the top line here, in terms of the percentage of studies funded by those two organisations that actually recruited to 100% of their target sample size, in the 9 years up to 2002, there was only 31% reaching that target. It got a little better up to 2008, just over half, and again, I think it's up to about 2/3 now, as Tom Wally told me earlier this year. But nevertheless, it's still a massive problem. Hence the need for the investment in the ORCA project. This is the online resource for recruitment research in clinical trials. It is a network-funded project, led by Carol Gamble from the Northwest Hub. And really, this is what I mean about how difficult it is to search the data, the literature for recruitment research. A well worked up search strategy for sure, but it still identified 51,000 records, resulting in 46,000 after removing duplicates, and after the abstract screen, we're still having to look at over 3,000 full text articles. So I believe that the door is still open to anybody that's interested in reviewing full text articles for this. So if you are somebody involved in recruitment research, it would be great to hear from you. Please do get in touch with Carol Gamble. The person leading the project, Nicola Harmon, is still around up until Christmas, but then she's on maternity leave. So in the meantime, it's probably best just to contact Carol if you have an interest in getting involved in this particular project. What we've done is to actually classify, or rather think through the recruitment pathway and thought about where research might fit into these 6 different domains across the top. So each of those full text papers will be reviewed for eligibility, and if they're eligible, we're going to try and classify them into one of these domains and then a subcategory within those. So you can see this is very broad ranging, but we were trying to take a holistic approach to recruitment. So this is not just about the consent approach or the approach to consent taken in the face-to-face meeting between a healthcare practitioner and the patient, for example. It's much broader than that, and looking at whether there might be issues of patient-clinician preference, for example, if you look at A5, or indeed incentives to recruiters, if you look at F2, for example, and anything else in between. So that's why we've ended up with over 3,000 full text articles. But once we have all of those categorized, it'll be really important to then systematically go through and see what do we know that we haven't already summarized, but also where are the gaps. I've talked a lot about trying to maximize the impact, and I think that it's really important that we can actually demonstrate not just that methodology makes a difference to the trials, but also that trials make a difference to health. And so Mike Clark started the initiative a couple of years ago, promoted during International Clinical Trials Day, and I believe that he's happy to continue to do this. He's leading this from the hub, the All Ireland hub, and we hope that all of our members will continue to submit stories about trials changing lives for International Clinical Trials Day in 2016. As I said, I really wanted to highlight the fact that the network, having been around since 2009, is in a position now to really try to establish better links internationally. So that's why I was particularly delighted when Declan and Sandra invited me to give this webinar to the Ireland Hub. So if there's anything that I've said that strikes a chord with you and something that you're interested in, then please do get in contact with Declan. Declan knows how our hub networks can interact, and I'd like to hope that we can start some collaborative work together. Mark Pittman, who was the program manager at the time that the network was initially set up, he was there in Glasgow last month. It was quite clear to him that it was really important for the MRC that the network developed its brand and its international status. You could see from that conference that that development is clearly underway, but we're only at the start of that kind of internationalization. An important date for your diary, however, is 2017 in Liverpool, and it is an international trials methodology conference for sure. It is joint with the Society for Clinical Trials, so it promises to be a fantastic showcase of trials methodology, not least for that in the UK and Ireland, but obviously we'll have some speakers that hopefully none of us have heard before coming over from the States, and it promises to be a really exciting conference. And with that, I will stop, and I can see there are some questions already, but I'll hand back to Sandra to bring some order.
That's great. Thanks very much, Paula. That was a fantastic overview. I was lucky enough to attend the conference, as you know, in Glasgow, and I would highly recommend it. I was certainly promoting it here amongst our colleagues when I came back, and definitely the date for 2017 will be something that we highlight amongst our network members. It was a very relevant and very well organised conference, so I think we got a lot out of it. Just for those that are attending the webinar here, if you'd like to pose a question directly to Paula, you can type this through the chat facility or the Q&A facility, and I can relay the question. So we give people maybe a chance to think about what they want to ask. I know one of our attendees here has made some suggestions for other webinars in the future. Really appreciate that, actually, and I will make a note of these. We can tailor what we deliver in the webinars, certainly, if anyone wants to make any suggestions also. I think what's great about the overview there, Paula, is that you have some great suggestions for how people can just get involved and can link in with yourselves in the HTMR, and also with us. We have great links with yourselves, and I think we've learned so much from the MRC HTMR network that has helped us get up off the ground and kind of have a focus and know where to look to and a direction to go in. So perhaps if I suggest to people, if they would like to get involved, to maybe contact us and we can put them in contact with yourselves, or if they want to, you know, as you mentioned, the specific hubs and the different working groups that people might like to get in touch with, I can put them in contact with one of the leads there. If people are interested, and as well the link as well to, as you promoted Mike's SWAR repository, we also have a link to that on our website. I might maybe liaise with you afterwards with, as you mentioned, Carol Gamble, maybe to circulate her email address to attendees, if that's okay, Paula.
Absolutely, yes, absolutely. She's actually sat in the same office as I am. She's keeping very quiet.
she can hear that something is happening.
I mean, you know, it's a two-way thing. You know, there are things that are being led from the network, and we'd be delighted for people to join in. You know, if it's through the working group or through a specific project such as the Recruitment Resource Project. But likewise, you know, you're clearly leading things, and I give the SWAR example as one, you know, that Mike's leading, you know, and we in the network, in the MRC network, we really want to support that. So, you know, kind of people can come to me and say, Paula, I'm the current chair, and I'll be handing that over to Jane Blaseby from March next year, but we're really keen to support other great ideas for trials methodology as well, so we can help, you know.
That's great, and we just on the as opposed to questions, I have people volunteering coming through here on the Q&A, and with people who are saying they're very interested in getting involved in the various initiatives that you mentioned. So I'll follow up with everybody here with just contact details, or and details of how they can get involved, maybe linking them directly with yourselves, or you can put me in touch with, for example, Carol on those initiatives.
Sure. I mean, I can see the questions here about webinars and things more for doctors and for health professionals, and I know that you do organise that, Sandra. It's not something that we have. We've been rather slow actually to run webinars. We're realising what a great vehicle they are. One of the outputs in Guidance Pack 1 is a webinar about central statistical monitoring. So we are trying to mix up our modes of communication a bit more than we have done before. But I was thinking that in terms of how to be a good chief investigator, we kind of have a template now for that workshop, and if that was something that you were interested in, Sandra and Declan, we'd be more than happy to have a conversation with you about how we organise that, because maybe you have a group of chief investigators in Ireland that you'd like to run the same sort of workshop for.
Thanks. I have written that down here as a follow-up with Paula. That certainly sounds like, is it like a one-day course?
It is, and it's not really, I mean, we don't try to teach them statistical. It's really for people who had their trial grant awarded. So we found that there were quite a number of statistical courses that people could go on, and there were sources of statistical advice that people could get if they were developing their trial grant application. But actually, once they'd had their grant funded, they were rather just left to try and get on with it. And of course,
Yeah.
Ian Roberts from the London School of Hygiene, who was our plenary speaker, the last one, he summed it up brilliantly by saying that, you know, when you get the grant, it's all fantastic, I've just achieved that grant, and then you go, oh no, I've just got that grant, and there's a realization that you have to deliver, and there's this long period of time, it could be 2 years or it could be 5 years, before you get to the very exciting end bit, which is where you publish and you go and present, and that sort, you know, so there's this euphoria at the beginning, hopefully euphoria at the end, but in the middle, there's just a hard slog.
Exactly.
And we focused it around that hard slog, about what, you know, being equipped with, really being forewarned about all of the things that can go wrong with recruitment and conduct and the team, and that's really where the focus was, and there wasn't really anything else that we could see that was being offered to chief investigators. That's
great. Yeah, no, that's great, and that definitely is something that we'd like to touch base on and perhaps deliver in Ireland next year. I think it's a really practical and useful tool for people. On that note, I think there aren't any more questions, but as I said, I will direct people to the relevant resources that you have highlighted by email and touch base with them, with the various people who are responsible for that. But Paula, just on that note, thanks very much for delivering today's webinar, and just to everybody, the recording of this webinar will be available on the website shortly today. So thanks very much, Paula.
Thank you very much. Thanks for inviting me.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.